Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba of LumumbaSpeaks.com in conjunction with Bequaline Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, back once again with part 19 of our groundbreaking Pan African leadership series, Past, Present, and Future, where we learn about great Pan Africanists of the past in order to make a better world for African people in the future. If you're watching, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and donate. You're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Before we get started, family, make sure once again hit the subscribe and like button. And I would be remiss in my duty as a Pan-Africanist and as an educator if I did not begin today's video with today's Black History Fact. And of course, today's Black History Fact is that on this day, many moons ago, as the elders would say, Queen Mother Assata Shakur was born. If many of you are unaware, shame on you if you do not know who Queen Mother Assata Shakur is, but she's one of the sisters in the struggle, one of the Queen Mothers of the struggle. Of course, we know she transitioned last year through Emily ancestors. If you don't know her story, you should learn her story. But Queen Mother Assata Shakur, of course, member of the Black Panther Party, formerly also a member of the Black Liberation Army. I've always averred that her memoir, titled Assata, is the Black female or African American female Pan-Africanist equivalent, autobiographical equivalent of Malcolm X's autobiography. So we know Malcolm's autobiography, if I remember correctly, was written and published in 64, 65, I believe 65. Then Assata Shakur's came a generation later, 2 decades later, in I believe 1984, right? Assata by Assata Shakur. So definitely wanting to make sure that we are doing our due diligence here at Lumumba Speaks and Bequaline Network by honoring Queen Mother Assata Shakur, who is now an ancestor. We do know that she was wrongfully convicted of deleting a New Jersey trooper, and that she was able to successfully escape prison, and she lived the rest of her life in political exile in Cuba. So for many people who want to go in on the Cuban government, we do know that historically the Cuban government has been an ally of African American revolutionaries. And so we definitely want to make sure that we take our time to honor, right, as we've been taught by Fannie Lou Hamer, to make sure that we never forget where we come from and always praise the bridges that carried us over. And that bridge today, of course, is Fannie Lou Hamer. Now, part 19 of our groundbreaking Pan-African leadership series, Past, Present, and Future, where we honor great Pan-Africanists of yesteryear to make a better world for African people today. And today we're going to be discussing Dutty Boukman. Many of you may be aware of who Boukman is. Of course, he was the leader, one of the early leaders of the Haitian Revolution. Dutty Boukman was born to a Muslim family in Senegambia, present-day Senegal in the Gambia. And he was initially enslaved in Jamaica. Of course, legend has it that he was initially enslaved in Jamaica. He eventually ended up in Haiti, where he may have become a leader of the Maroons. And we do know that he was a voodoo Huguenot priest. However, this claim only originated, according to many modern sources. We know different. We do know that the, of course, voodoo ceremony that took place in August 14, 1791, at Boys Cayman was led by, of course, Boukman and Cecil Fateman, another Pan-African revolutionary that we will honor on our, of course, Pan-African Leadership Series. We know that this ceremony served as the catalyst for the 1791 slave revolt that would later become known as the Haitian Revolution. Boukman was a key leader of the slave revolt in the Le Cap Francas region in the north of the colony. He was unfortunately deleted by French troops on 7 November 1791, just a few months after the uprising. And of course, it was stated that the French, of course, decapitated him and, of course, showed his head to, of course, the rebels as a means of trying to, of course, sully their spirit. There was a belief that Boukman may have special powers that allowed him to be invulnerable, impervious to injury, and of course, death. But we know that was not the case. However, his legend lives on, and what he did, of course, set the standard, of course, for Pan-African revolt. So in about 1767, it's alleged that Boukman was born in the region of Senegambia, of course, present-day Senegal and Gambia, where he was a Muslim cleric. He was captain of Senegambia and forced into slavery in the Caribbean, first to the island of Jamaica and then Santo Domingo, modern-day Haiti, where he became a Haitian voodoo Hongon priest. He was known to some of his followers as Zamba Boukman. After he attempted to teach other enslaved people how to read, he was sold to a French plantation owner and placed as a slave driver and later a coach driver, right? So this is one of the reasons why he was called Boukman. Of course, legend has it that because he was literate, he was knowledgeable of who he was as an African man. And of course, this is something that he's seeking to share, of course, with his brothers and sisters in Haiti, and I would even argue even in Jamaica as well. So this concept of reach one, teach one, of course, is prevalent here when we look at the history of Dutty Boukman. During his time as a coach driver, Boukman was able to travel between plantations and estates. This allowed him to facilitate communication, learn political news, and encourage resistance fractions among enslaved people. So we really talk about this concept of adaptive vitality here, this ability to adjust to changing circumstances without losing substance or essence, right? So we find that throughout, of course, African people's history, but particularly in the death, decadence, and dysphoria of the African diaspora, we see this practice of African people taking whatever situation they're in and using that as a way to foment, of course, a revolution. So, of course, working as a coach driver, Boukman met Jean-Jacques Dessalines, another enslaved person who helped inspire and lead resistance. Boukman and Dessalines were enslaved on plantations less than a mile apart, and due to their assignments and skills, had more privileges, allowing greater movement than other enslaved workers. This allowed them to form a strong bond with one another, which would ultimately help with their plan. Boukman would later work with the famous Haitian revolutionary leaders Jeannot Bullock, Jean Farkas, and of course Georges Biasso to inspire the, of course, revolution. His French name came from the English nickname Boukman, with scholars like Seblain and Diouf have interpreted as having Islamic origins. They note that the term man of the book is synonym for a Muslim in many parts of the world. The name Dutty likely refers to the plantation where Boukman was enslaved, Dutuf, of course, right? But so, of course, one of the greatest monuments or memories of Dutty Boukman, of course, is encapsulated in C.L.R. James's book, Black Jacobins, right? He talks about, and this is actually in of course, C.L.R. James's text, the speech that Boukman gave at the Boys Cayman on 14 August 1791, right? And he states, while they're sacrificing the black pig, and many people may be unaware, but of course, black pigs were indigenous to Haiti. Of course, much centuries later, of course, the U.S. government came in and engaged in their imperial machinations, and of course, restructured the economy, put in import American white pigs. But black pig is indigenous to Haiti. And Boukman gave this rousing speech, 14 August 1791. He says that this God who made the sun, who brings us light from above, who raises the sea, who makes the storm rumble, that God is there. Do you understand? Hiding in the cloud, he watches us. He sees all that the whites do. The God of the whites pushes them to crime, but he wants us to do good deeds. But the God who is so good orders us to vengeance. He will direct our hands and give us help. Throw away the image of the God of the whites who thirst for our tears. Listen to the liberty that speaks in all our hearts, right? And so this speech that was given, right, not only spoke to, of course, what part of the crux of what we find in terms of African liberation movements, of course, labor laws, is this concept of African cultural and religious retention, right? You know, unfortunately, when we go to the Negro Church or Abrahamic religious institutions, many would argue that there was a belief in the Abrahamic God, Allah, or Jesus, that really, you know, push Black people or African people to fight back. But we know that is not the case, right? If you ever do a deep dive into slave revolts, insurrections, you will find that it was a practice of African cultural retention, particularly religious retention, that played a key role in, of course, what African people resisting, particularly violently. So I think that's very important. We know that the revolution began on August 22nd. Boukman gathered enslaved people from neighboring sugar plantations. Boukman, the people elected Boukman to act as the leader and commander. He led these forces, of course, unfortunately, of course, in November, he was killed while defending a rebel base. The French then publicly, as I said, displayed his head in an attempt to dispel the aura of invisibility that he had cultivated. Below his head was an inscription, "The head of Boukman, leader of the rebels." Upon hearing the news of his death, slave leaders and rebels mourned his loss and held services to honor him. Some of the rebels demanded the execution of all white prisoners as retribution, but another former enslaved leader, John Frank Cross, took control and prevented this. So I think there's a couple things really to key in on when we look at, of course, honoring Boukman in our, of course, pantheon of great Pan-African leaders. One, I think he had foresight, right, to be willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, right? When we talk about Pan-Africanism, we oftentimes discuss the fact that there are an innumerable number of leaders who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Now, does that mean that the goal is to be a martyr? No. But we also understand that if we're willing to truly advocate globally for African redemption, right, to restore our people to our traditional greatness, that is not something that you could take off the table. The second issue is when we talk about Boukman being a leader in the Haitian Revolution, one of the things that we have to consider and remember is that he was elected by the people. So we talk about this democratic process. There are a number of individuals who have and I would argue these are individuals who do not have a working knowledge of African history, that the concept of democracy is foreign to African people. If you've done a deep dive or have a working knowledge of African history and culture, you know that is not the case. And Boukman being placed in position of leadership, right, at the advent of the Haitian Revolution is an example of that, right? And so what we find here is that there was a democratic process that elected him to be one of the leaders, right? And the biggest issue was that his leadership was not self-serving. He was not engaging in graft, right? It was for the benefit of the people, right? And so when we think of Boukman, Dutty Boukman, right, I think we should think of the spirit of one, an intellectual, one who engages in adaptive vitality, the ability to adjust to changing circumstances without losing one's substance or essence, but also, and most importantly, someone who is democratically elected, so not someone who is self-appointed, someone who is appointed by the people, right? And I'm just speculating here, but I'm quite sure that during, of course, the revolution, he may have been killed in battle. He may even been captured. We don't know. I don't know exactly, even though I've done, I've reviewed literature. But what we do know is that his leadership was to the benefit of the people, for the greater good. And I think that when we look at, of course, the Pan-Africanism in the contemporary setting, right? Contemporary Pan-Africanism, 21st century Pan-Africanism, it has to be, the work that we do must be for the greater good, right? I would argue we can't be revolutionary in one aspect of our lives, but regressive in another, right? And so now we're going to do a show on that, and I'm going to really, lean into what I'm discussing there about when we talk about some contemporary Pan-African leaders, particularly a current Pan-African leader who's a head of state, right? But we talk about Dutty Boukman, educated, literate, intellectually astute, right? Had the mindset, the disposition of revolution and war, right? Practicing adaptive vitality. Then, of course, last but not least, someone who was democratically elected to lead the people, not someone who was self-serving and self-appointed. I think that is one of the take-homes, right, that we can take from, of course, Dutty Boukman, and I think also for looking at the fact that he was revolutionary everywhere he went. The reason why he was sold to Haiti is because of what he was putting in work in Jamaica, right? Shout out to Jamrock, right? He was making his bones in Jamaica. So wherever he went, he was fomenting insurrection. He was fomenting revolution. He gave, to his dying breath, right, was to advocate for the redemption of African people and the restoration of our people to our traditional greatness. So, family, let me know what you think about Dutty Boukman. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and donate. This was part 19 of our groundbreaking Pan-African Leadership Series, Past, Present, and Future, where we honor great Pan-Africans of the past in order to learn how to make a better world for African people in the future. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace.
Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on Black. Peace.